Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Conquer the Clutter podcast for the end of January, the 31st. So something interesting happened this week, and I wanted to share it with you because it is the basis of the next few podcasts. I'm going to run a series about the comorbidities. That's the proper word, but that's just a $5 word for other coexisting conditions that coexist with hoarding, whether it's hoarding behavior or to the extent that hoarding is a disorder for you. And they don't cause hoarding, all right? They are entities of their own. But what they do, I've almost started to think of hoarding in some cases as an opportunistic entity, disorder, if it's very severe, that is kind of hanging in the wings. And I believe for hoarding to be hanging in the wings, it has to be that you are somehow more susceptible to it. All right. Something has to kind of set you up. And we've gone through the three different types of predispositions. And I don't want to get us derailed today by going off on that. But this week, somebody who I was working with had a hard time understanding that when we're talking about ADD, ADHD, or we're talking about procrastination, or we're talking about any of the other more commonly known coexisting comorbidities, we're actually talking about hoarding, all right? They're like this. They're not like this when they happen in our life. And so it occurred to me that if we did maybe a 5 or 6 podcast series on the more common comorbidities and just talked about the more normal range when people discover it and they're living with it and they don't know kind of exactly in the beginning what it is. They don't know how to tell for sure if it's something that they need to deal with additionally. It just feels like an extra steep hill they have to climb. And they don't really have a good idea of how to put on their hiking boots and climb that hill. All right, so that it doesn't disrupt them. And so I decided that what I would do, and we're going to start with anxiety. We'll start alphabetically, why not? And I want to talk about what the comorbidity is, what are the symptoms, and not the most extreme symptoms, but how, when there's just something that you know is there, but you're not sure exactly how to tell if it is, in this case, anxiety. And then what the behaviors are. What are the costs of those comorbidities for most people? We're not going to deal with the outer limits of it, all right? This isn't therapy. This is so that you've got a guidebook and you go, you know what? There's enough of that I have to say today that is a factor in my life. And then I want to do a really kind of user-friendly, here are some really, again, user-friendly ways to start dealing with it so that you can put the reins on it and not have it drag you. You have more control yourself. All right. So that's our goal today. And as I said, we're going to start talking about anxiety. So there are many reasons, all right, why people develop anxiety. one podcast isn't enough to do it justice because anxiety and depression have to be among the most common other mental health factors. It's a continuum, all right? When we talk about anxiety, it isn't just one lump. It's a continuum. Where you are on that continuum probably is guided by two factors. What brought you to anxiety? All right. Do you have a neurological, do you have a biological a predisposition? Or is it life events and the failure to understand the cost that they were exacting for you? And so you've got this other ball to keep in the air along with everything else that happens on your daily life. All right. So, first, we're going to talk about the most common form of anxiety. And we're going to start with generalized anxiety. And we're going to talk about it as a disorder. What that means, though, is that that's a little more upstream toward a significant impact. You may be somewhere down, and on a good day, maybe way down on the continuum of symptoms. All right. And chronic or generalized, sorry, anxiety disorder is defined by you having this internal disruption chronically, right? Most days it doesn't go anywhere. And it has been, um, to some degree, present for at least 6 months. We're not going to go to the outliers like panic attacks, phobia, obsessions. But if you are having panic attacks, phobias, or obsessions, know that that means you're further down the continuum of severity. All right. So you want to get a handle on this ASAP. And if you can't, you want to get professional help. This is no way to spend your life. There are really good ways to learn how to handle anxiety. All right. And the sense you have with a kind of moderate range, mild range, is just that persistent kind of anxiousness. All right. And worry. Worry is a big thing. All right. There is no such thing as a solution if you don't worry about it first. All right, watch that as a behavior pattern. Now, the diagnosis of anxiety focuses on two or more, commonly more stressful life circumstances. And generally, these are aspects that are part of every one of our everyday life. They're things like finances, all right? But excessive worry, excessive preoccupation, relationships, health, work problems. Now, if you're not working at a job outside, work problems could also be your ability to put a plan in place and work on your hoarding piles. That's work, all right? Or school performance, if you happen to be still in the being educated times of life. And it has to be for the majority of days. It's not once in a long while that this happens. It's the majority of days. You're stuck with excessive worry and that kind of internal roiling agitation. All right. And again, I want to repeat, it has to have been in existence the majority of days for at least 6 months. Now, it's common if you're dealing with generalized anxiety to have a number of different types of worries, okay? And to spend a lot of your time worrying rather than processing and planning and putting in place an action plan that actually works well enough. Usually, a person who's experiencing generalized anxiety finds it difficult to do other things. You can't focus. all right? Even good self-care. Now, I want you to imagine yourself with this internal, almost constant agitation, all right, and worry, right? And you're not engaging in adequate self-care, effective self-care. Tell me how that is a recipe for anything other than the anxiety gradually getting a deeper, deeper, and stronger hold on you. That to me is a non-starter. If all else fails, good self-care. Good self-care in appropriate chunks regularly is not goofing off. It's not procrastination. It's not avoidance. All right. It's like arming yourself for the job at hand that you see as a priority. Now, usually, because the individual living with generalized anxiety has generalized anxiety, they can't control. You find it, you know you should. You say things to yourself, but you can't get a handle, you can't really get control of your worrying behavior. All right. And at least 3. Do you see how this isn't sort of a one size fits all? Do you see that? Okay. There are numeric quantifiers so that everybody who's worrying doesn't think that they have generalized anxiety. So there has to be at least 3 of the following 6 symptoms. There are 6 more common symptoms. You need to have at least 3, all right? And they have to be happening. They can't all be in the past. Tension. You know, what does tension feel like for you? Stop for a second and ask yourself, how do I know when I am in a state of tension? Feeling keyed up, you know, that kind of roiling internal, your nerves are on edge, okay? Being easily fatigued, okay? Those are common with anxiety. Also, the next 3, difficulty concentrating. Now, that can be a symptom of other things as well, ADD and ADHD, all right? But individuals with ADD and ADHD also have a higher risk factor for anxiety. One doesn't cause the other, but they just are natural combinations. Okay, the 5th symptom that you must have 3 of 6 is irritability. Are you easily just off the mark? Okay, your first reaction at any demand or any setback or any other than feel good experience is irritability. All right. Are your muscles tight? Muscle tightness. Are you just like wound up tighter than a drum? And it's not going to be a surprise to anyone that 3 of those 5 yield 6 almost as a certainty, and that is difficulty sleeping. You don't get enough sleep, you don't get enough REM sleep, and you're setting yourself up for setback. You're setting yourself up for overwhelmed, all right, and procrastination. Now, generalized anxiety, I'm having trouble today with generalized anxiety disorder, is frequently associated with the following physical symptoms. This is your checklist of, is this generalized anxiety? Or to some degree, it's a spectrum, remember, it's not 100%. And so the physical symptoms are 1, tension headaches, irritable bowel syndrome, IBS. It's been around for a while. It's had a hold on you if you've got IBS. That's not one of the first symptoms. All right. Blood pressure high. Is it chronically high? Doesn't have to be off the charts. Is it always at the high normal so that you're always just on the cusp of going into that next riskier range? Is that where you live day to day? Insomnia, you are tired. You do need to sleep. You want sleep. You just can't release the tension enough. You can't clear your head enough to sleep soundly on a regular basis. Now, I don't know what the connection to osteoporosis is, but in the research that I did this week on a number of expert sources, it came up fairly regularly. So I thought I would add it to one of the physical symptoms. And you know what osteoporosis feels like. All right. Okay. Now, you're likely to receive an actual diagnosis, not a self-diagnosis. A self-diagnosis is more of your antenna being up, all right, and it's your alert system. We're still in a range here where we can do something about this. We can get a handle on it. We can learn skills and strategies to take ourselves down, all right, in the less riskier, less paying a price range of anxiety existing in your day-to-day life. But you get a diagnosis more likely, all right, if your worry and associated symptoms that we just went through there are causing you on a pretty regular basis, not intermittent, not once in a while, not just on your worst days, significant distress. Distress is, do they interfere with the activities of daily living? And activities of daily living are the things that we do the most, and we have to do them practically on an everyday basis. They interfere with your ability to function. Function means you want to do something. You have the intent, you have a plan, you have enough of the resources, and it just doesn't happen. Okay, especially in the following areas of life: occupationally, going to work, being at work, or whatever, if you're not at work any longer, whatever your daily work is. Good self-care, making sure that the work of today stays today's work and doesn't become tomorrow's work and the next day's work and the next day's work, along with whatever builds up behind, which ends up with piles and hoarding. Interferes with you socially. That's your ability to function. We are social beings as human beings. We're not meant to be isolated for long periods of time, or really very long periods of time at all. All right. Or in any other important area of your life. That might be childcare if you've got children. It might be elder care. It might be other responsibilities that you have. Okay. Now, individuals with generalized anxiety reported the following basic experiences. All right. Avoidance of anything that feels phobic. Now, phobic just is an extreme word for fear. Fear or uncertainty. Avoidance. Avoidance of situations that are uncommon. All right. Where you don't feel that you have the ability or the strength or the ability to concentrate. And you have even a mild fear response. And so you avoid anything that even mildly mimics what makes you feel uncomfortable. So that's a whole lower range. And probably if you're living in the range where you avoid even things that are mildly uncomfortable, you're pretty much describing being confined to the couch. All right. Anxious self-talk. When things are a little stressful or very stressful, or you didn't get it right, it didn't turn out the way you planned and you intended and you needed it to. Anxious self-talk. Labeling yourself. All right, discrediting yourself, undermining yourself, discouraging yourself. Is that one of the first places you go to when things aren't exactly the way they should be for you? Okay, and this anxious self-talk, okay, has the potential, has the likelihood actually, of becoming your own personal monologue, which means it is there as the first voice. It is there as the most present voice. It is the big influencer on whether you dare to take step 2 to overcome something that is mildly uncomfortable. All right. And much of the time, and the more you do it, the subtler it becomes. Watch out for it. This week, your homework, write this down, okay? Your homework is to listen to the first 3 things you say to yourself when anything doesn't go smoothly. Because this internal monologue, it becomes automatic. There is no innocent word like, oh, I'm so stupid. No. All right. That is something that just chips away at your sense of competence. That's not an innocent statement. My mother was right. Whatever it is that you're saying to yourself that has a loaded message behind it, I want you first to be aware of it, because you will build a capacity for anxiety if you keep up negative self-talk. And it can be, the reason I want to give it to you as homework is because it can be so subtle. All right. Sometimes it's not even something you say. Sometimes it's the first thought that goes through your mind, but you know enough not to say it. So it doesn't count. Yes, it does. Yes, it absolutely does. Okay. It can become so subtle that you don't even notice it. So homework today, people, and this week is make the effort to consciously pay attention to whatever you are saying to yourself, including non-verbally. Now, another huge factor, all right, in the development of anxiety and then it going on to become generalized anxiety are mistaken beliefs. And we've covered this before, and we will cover it again later. There are 11 problematic thinking styles. You know, some of those, I'm not going to go through all 11, but some of them are ones like all or nothing thinking. You know, if it isn't perfect, it doesn't count. Labeling yourself and others. Magnification, something happens and it feels like the end of the world, all right? Or minimizing things so that you don't even look at it. You don't even put it on the radar. Those are just a few. Okay, now, when you engage in this automatic monologue, this internal monologue, and you have habituated it to the point where it isn't even something you have to say anymore, it's just the thought that goes sailing by first in line, something else happens. That little bit of self-harm that you're doing starts to, what would the word be? Cover, make harder to appreciate, helps you to withhold your feelings. All right. And things like denying anger. Anger scares a lot of people. They think of it as wrong. They think of it as a problem, rather than just one more emotion. Anger is a very mobilizing emotion, all right? And it's not a bad thing to have appropriately because it'll get you moving, all right? So, withholding feelings and denying feelings that are so basic, like anger, frustration. You feel the frustration. There's no not feeling frustration. All right. Where does it register for you right now? Frustration is sort of a preliminary step to anger. If you don't let yourself admit anger, all right, for whatever reason, where does the frustration register right now? Today, tomorrow, the next day, we're all going to have frustrations. All right. Right now, I want you to put down where in your body you're aware that frustration registers first. How many people here, when they feel sad, find something to get out of it right away? Sort of like back up, back up, back up. Reverse, reverse. All right. Or even excitement. Is there anybody out here today who has numbed themselves, benigned themselves to the extent that they can't feel even excitement? It's a little bit like dysthymia. All right. It's a little bit. You want to look that one up. Dysthymia. DYS. So this free floating anxiety also happens when you feel, and this happens in my experience. My clients tell me in two different ways. Kind of a feeling of vague anxiousness. It isn't overt, it isn't strong. And my belief is that you're either just at the inception of anxiety, so it's not really clear to you what it is, or you're so entrenched in it that you've had to put layers on top and suppress it so that you can't feel it. Now it has become vague because you've suppressed it so much. It's still there, it's still active, and it's still affecting you. For those people who want to look up dysthymia, DYSTHYMIA. All right. Now, you may have noticed that after you release your feelings, angry feelings, you have a good cry, for instance, you knock that punching bag all over the place, you have a good talk to yourself, you go for a walk, you go for a run, you go for a bath, you go for a shower. All right. However you release your feelings, do you notice that you actually feel calmer and more at ease? Do it more often. Do those things more often. One of my favorites when I'm really annoyed about something and it's really got a hold on me, all right, is first I have to think it out. I have to make that plan. What is this? So I'm fixing the right thing, in my opinion. What has worked for me in the past? I like shortcuts. And is that an option for me right now in this situation? Because once was an accident, twice is a coincidence. The third time, I won't put that finger up. The third time, all right, is a pattern. We deal with it when it's a pattern because life is too short. And I invite you to consider there should never be a fourth, fifth, or sixth, etc. time to be dealing with something that is present in your life that doesn't feel good. A problem solved is better. A problem avoided, rather, is better than a problem solved. And I do that on 3. And then if I'm having trouble with it, once I've kind of got a handle, I'm a water baby. I'm in the shower, I shower it off, and I watch the whole thing go down the drain. I love it. It's a visual. It really works for me. If it can work for you, do whatever is legal and healthy that and doesn't cause another problem that works for you, and do it on the 3rd instance. There's no point. If it's happened once, twice, 3 times, it plans to come back. You better be, I invite you to consider, you are worth being ready for it to the best extent you can be. And you will feel calmer, and you will reclaim whatever ease is available to you at that time. Now, here's a thought, all right? And that is, what about trying on the 3rd time and then backing up, developing strategies to be able to express your feelings? Expressing your feelings will have a noticeable physical effect, all right? And you know what? That after the moment of expression and a very short time after, where there's a process that is undertaken either with yourself or another, all right? It's the fast track to reducing your level of anxiety. Try it. What's the worst that can happen? All right? The failure to release these emotions and these feelings and the physical symptoms, if you hang on to it, if you just settle for persistently some, you're going to be far more susceptible to that vague fog of being just on the verge of overwhelmed, which is a little bit of disorientation. When you're overwhelmed, all right, you are in a state of disorientation. It's not a good place to be. You're not playing with all of the abilities you have. Things feel not quite real, a little overwhelming. You're not motivated. You're not energized at all. You feel a little derailed, a little sort of like, you've been put back on the bench. You're not playing the game anymore. You're on the bench. And then that just starts another round of worrying and anxiety. If you delay handling whatever is causing your anxiety or adding to it, just to the degree that it becomes a problem that needs to be addressed, should be addressed. You don't do it in a timely way, that taking that little sidestep to overwhelmed and being out of the game, anxious, that's where the worrying and anxiety starts again. It is possible. Now, this is a much lauded in some cultures. This is a much valued strategy, but it isn't good for them and it isn't good for you. And that is being too stoic. All right. That can set you up for a state of emotional freeze. You pull out stoic as your strategy enough times that it becomes more habituated than is good for you, You won't be able to find your feelings. You won't be able to feel your feelings. Feelings? What are feelings? All right. You'll go to your head all the time. You'll intellectualize. You'll stay in your head because you don't feel it in your head. You don't let it have access to your body where it can send out the signals that you are in distress. And then when it thaws, because it will thaw, all of that anxiety, all of those emotions and feelings, they're all there waiting for you. But they probably have started to exact a cost physically. All right. Maybe you've got ulcers. Maybe you're so fatigued that you've got chronic fatigue. Maybe your muscles have been so tight for so long, you fail to recognize it, and you've got some muscular issues like fibromyalgia. Maybe you've got irritable bowel syndrome because you've been sucking down that stress, all right, rather than dealing with it, and it's permeated right down through your whole body. Now, what's one way to start dealing with that? Appropriate assertiveness. There is a reason why we did that whole series on boundaries and limits. All right, because healthy boundaries and limits allow you to practice and fine tune your own way of being assertive. And when you draw the line in the sand and you stand behind it for yourself as well as for others, respectfully, all right, but consistently, you've got a lot of really healthy avoidant behavior going on. You're not catching the ball that somebody else is sending your way that isn't healthy, that really is their stuff, not yours. And we're talking assertiveness. That's different from aggression. Anger is associated with being aggressive. That's not true. All right. Anger is just dealing with the negative feelings. You can deal with those assertively. First of all, you have to feel them and recognize them. You have to give them a name. You have to kind of do a little bit of a search as to where they started, what started them, all right? And then you have to express it appropriately according to what do you need? Where is it? And how do you get enough of it to make enough of a difference? Because when you need to be assertive, something is happening that is denying you that right to have enough of what you need and are usually entitled to. All right. Now, assertiveness, healthy boundaries and limits, write that one down. That's the panacea to better mental health. And it usually also yields better physical health as well. You know why? Because you're not carrying the pain. You're not carrying the grievance, the frustration, the sadness, the anger. And when those have been around for a little while, or you've allowed them to repeat without addressing them, without drawing that line in the sand assertively, how many people here can say that they honestly have a fair number of resentments? Okay, resentment is the residual garbage of unaddressed frustrations, anger, disappointment, pain that's been caused that you've experienced. By that time, resentment is the festering of those things. They've been around undealt with for a long time by the time you have resentment. Resentment is a really destructive thing to allow yourself to carry. Sometimes just doing what you can do, all right, what you're comfortable doing, and you may have to repeat, all right, and not engaging, that's a really good recipe for resentment. You'll feel it in the moment, but it won't go into the background somewhere in the back of the fridge and start to fester and mold. All right. Now, why does assertiveness, why does expressing healthy boundaries and limits, why does that work and why is that so important that you develop those strategies? It's because you won't be carrying around all of that pain, all of those grievances, all of the sadness, frustration, anger, resentment on your shoulders every day. Because if it's there, you carry it. It's not packed away somewhere. It's like this boulder we drag behind us. It slows us down. We don't experience our best game if we're dragging all of that emotion unresolved. All right. We need ways to release it. Or better yet, we need ways to avoid it. And avoiding it is right out of the gate. If you know that something is a non-starter, say no right from the beginning. Nicely, politely. You don't have to explain yourself. Go back to the podcasts on healthy boundaries and limits and do a refresher. It's there. It's free. Being able to release built up emotion frees us, and it helps us preserve both our mental and our physical health. All right. It's like a really good workout. The lack of self-nurturing skills are very common in anxiety disorders. All right. So is the pervasive sense of insecurity. Did you know that something as debilitating as agoraphobia? Now, there's a lot more, but I think agoraphobia is a pretty extreme symptom, okay? That's the need to stay close to a safe place or a safe person, and it's about insecurity. Now, as I was doing the research, it occurred to me, is there a similarity between letting yourself not set a healthy boundary and limit for something that doesn't feel good, doesn't feel right, does feel inappropriate? Is there any relationship, any similarity to agoraphobia? Hmm? Are you really just paying a price, all right, to feel safe? To say, not to alienate, not to put at risk the relationship with a person who makes you feel safe or who gives you some level of safety, right? That's a big price to pay. If you really are safe with that person or that place or that situation or that experience, whatever it is that that safety represents, standing up for yourself shouldn't be a cost that takes that away, removes that. All right? So be careful what you assign those feelings of safety and security to. Insecurity arises from a variety of conditions that we get set up for in childhood, including parental neglect. Now, at some point, I am going to do an extensive adverse childhood experiences workshop. All right, at some point I am. We're doing ADD and ADHD right now and procrastination, but it is coming. So, just to repeat that, those feelings of insecurity and people think, well, just because I can't set boundaries and limits doesn't mean I'm insecure. Yeah, it does actually. All right, because That's where you draw the line in the sand. That's where you express who you are, how you feel, and even just a little bit of what you need. Usually when you're setting a boundary and limit, all you're doing is you're setting your bottom line. You're not going for gold here. You're usually just saying, no, that's the limit. All right. And when you don't do that, you are buying security. You're avoiding putting something at risk. Insecurity, no matter what form it takes, arises from a variety of conditions that we are predisposed to in childhood. Now we're going to go through those. I hope this doesn't trigger anyone, including parental neglect, including any form of abandonment, abuse, even if the abuser didn't call it abuse or didn't admit abuse, if you experienced it as abuse, that's what it is. All right. Overprotection is also a form of parental neglect. Anything that is too little or way too little, way too much are mirror images of each other, as well as growing up in a home where alcoholism or chemical dependency existed in the family. At that point, what you have is a parent or parents who can't be available. If someone had a parent or two parents whose life was about alcoholism, any form of addiction really, or chemical dependency, there are 4 sections in our availability. There is the preparation, there is the event itself, there is the coming down, there is the available period. For 3 of those 4 components of experience with alcoholism or chemical dependency or chronic illness, all right? For 3 of those 4, the parent, the person, the caregiver, the primary attachment figure couldn't be available. You may feel sorry for them, you may love them, you may understand them. This is about neglect. This is about when you needed protection, when you needed security, it couldn't or wouldn't be available. It's not to say they made a choice. It's to say you're looking at this through the lens of your experience. That is enough. In order to do that, you don't have to blame anybody. You don't have to have hard feelings about anybody. You don't have to stop loving that person. It's about when you had the right, because developmentally that was the stage you were at. That was what you needed desperately as a child, consistently as a child, reliably as a child. If you didn't get it, don't be surprised if you're paying a price to stay secure in other ways that maybe you don't have to pay so much of a price. Okay. And it happens, that anxiety, that insecurity happens since as a child, as a person, you didn't receive nurturing, not consistently. And adult survivors of these various forms of deprivation often lack the capacity to properly take care of their own needs. Are you doing that? Because if you are, you're leaving yourself unaware of how to love and nurture yourself. And love may just be accept yourself, warts and all. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be anywhere near perfect. All right. to be worthy of accepting yourself. To be loved by another is a great experience, but it does not take the place, first and foremost, of loving yourself. And that doesn't mean a big ego trip. All right. You don't have a big head when you love yourself. It just means you accept yourself for who you are at that time. And if there is a need for improvement, you know that you're worth making the effort. You know that you're worth the solution you're seeking. You are not as you felt as a child, maybe even vaguely, but you didn't have the words to put to it, feelings of unworthiness. Why doesn't my mom? Why doesn't my daddy? All right. Because that experience of deprivation, inconsistent parenting and support. We're not talking about spoiling. We're talking about the legitimate needs of a child. Set somebody up for many other forms of relationship, those same people, those same situations that you need to set boundaries and limits for, and personal self-neglect. Now, along with that, that can't happen if you don't have too much in the area of low self-esteem, lower than is needed, lower than is necessary, lower than what you deserve. And that can factor into, get ready for it, feelings of being overwhelmed. We have just come full circle. Do you get it? Okay. And especially as adults with the demands we have on us every single moment of the day, practically. And then add to that our baseline responsibilities. The lack of self-nurturing strongly supports developing anxiety. And the most lasting solution to parental abuse or deprivation or unavailability, we can all do. We can all do. We can all give ourselves this, is to become a good parent to yourself. Because the only person who understood you well enough, no one understands you like you understand yourself. You know yourself better than any poor, unsuspecting parent who has, I make a joke, and it is a joke, that, the history of parenting is that you're going to do things that your children are going to have vivid details of on the couch of a psychiatrist or a therapist. All right. It's a joke. But the most effective is to become a good parent to yourself. And you start that by gaining awareness of your needs and healing the child within. Quite often when I'm having to process something and it's harder, I always go to that little girl in me and say, okay, hold on tight. I've got this. Hold on tight. I've got this. We're good. We're good. And becoming more nurturing toward yourself. This is not self-indulgence. This is not some new age thing. This is loving and accepting yourself, no matter whether it's your best day or your worst day. Now, on your worst day, chances are you're going to have to be making plans for remediation. But you're worth the solution. You're worth it. And you're worth every moment of having to make the effort to pull off that solution. And enjoy it when you accomplish it. Another experience by people with people who live with anxiety is our physical symptoms like muscle spasms Anybody get muscle spasms? Apparently, it's either a shortage of magnesium in your system or it's an overabuse of tension. And you experience as that tight kind of restrict your breathing. All right. Did you know that when your breathing is shallow, especially in the upper part of your chest, obviously it's restricted, you're more likely to bring on anxiety that didn't have to be. You can actually put, and I've seen this happen when I did my master's placement for a year part-time with Nepean Police Victim Crisis Unit, and I was going out on calls with police officers and detectives and saw some pretty raw stuff. You can actually put your body and mind into a panic state. I've seen it happen simply by not giving it enough oxygen at a cellular level. The worse you feel, the first thing you start to do, people, is deep breathe right down to as low in your belly as you can. All right? You can head it off. That's the easiest solution. Tense muscles also tend to keep your feelings suppressed. All that means is you're holding on to it and it's stored away somewhere and it's going to exact a price. It's also going to increase any possible anxiety you may be feeling. Well, you wouldn't be tense if you didn't have some kind of anxiousness. Can you see? All right. As we make a concerted effort to relax our muscles throughout our whole body, it's going to help our mind begin to slow down and become calmer. That's a no-brainer. All right. Now, that tension can be caused or exacerbated, really, by stimulants and other dietary factors. We're talking about excessive caffeine, excessive nicotine, classic to aggravate anxiety. All right. And they can actually leave you more vulnerable if whatever the negative event is isn't finished. All right. Or it increases and you have any relationship with panic attacks, it can actually leave you more vulnerable to panic attacks. So does a high stress lifestyle. It puts you on the path to anxiety. Chronically high stress lifestyle. All right. The role of stress, both as a predisposing factor, are often bedrock problems to anxiety. Dealing with the stress, maybe after we do some of these comorbidities, we'll do just stress. All right. Another feeder of the development of anxiety is the lack of meaning or a sense of purpose in our life. When you feel that your life has meaning, when you feel that your life has purpose and you have a sense of direction, no matter what that is, just having that gives your life a sense of purpose and is a big factor in relieving senses of boredom and that vague sense of being stuck. Anybody realize that that vague sense of being stuck is a precursor to overwhelmed? All right. And it happens largely because we're just not seeing and expressing enough of our potential. We're going into that stuck state rather than push through it in the ways that have worked for us in the past. First thing I always do when I am confronted with a problem, take a deep breath. Try not to get distracted by the feelings. They're there, okay. And then I ask myself, what do I know? And I don't know everything. Or who do I know when I especially don't know what I need? And what have I done in the meantime that I've got to handle this, or until I find the answer? What have I done in the past that worked to any degree adequately? We start there. Every single person here, every single one of the 50 people present today, every one of you have done things that worked better than staying stuck, bordering on panic, or overwhelmed and shut down. That sense of stuckness can be a potential breeding ground for anxiety. Don't stay there. And when you go there often enough and you just kind of sit there and let it color you, let it affect you, you're setting yourself up not just for anxiety, but whatever is associated has a high potential of becoming phobic. Phobic isn't this big, nasty thing. It's just I avoid something that feels uncomfortable or feels unsafe. Find the meaning. Find the purpose for you, no matter what stage of life you're at, for you being on this earth. What can you do and what can you contribute to something that is worthwhile and meaningful to you? And then at the same time, my friends, treat yourself with the same commitment that you commit to the meaning and purpose of your life. Because you are the instrument of that positive thing happening, no matter how big or how small. And my contribution was to be here today with 50 people who I am dying to see again next week. Take care, everybody.
Can you do it? Yes, you can. Yes, you can.